So here we are on a Friday morning, and happy to be alive. And the sun, well, the sun isn't shining. It is shining, but there's clouds between us and it. Is that the case in God's
It's
own
actually,
county, Donegal?
it's sort of humid, but it's there's no sunshine. I'm waiting
Aye.
for it to dry up, Jude. I have to go and do me lawn, but it was torrential rain here yesterday. So when you try and cut grass and the grass is wet, it just bogs the lawnmower non-stop.
Well, I tell you why the sun isn't shining in Donegal, or here for that matter, because we're not celebrating the platinum anniversary of sufficient energy.
Absolutely, Dr. Collins. I can understand that.
We've been found out, and God is punishing us.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about this a bit more seriously now. There have been, there are. It's not just Friday. It's Saturday. It's
Sunday, and it's Monday.
The whole weekend, and
4
people
days.
got an extra day off work. And certainly, judging by the crowds that I saw on TV and by the Vox Pop they did with them, the English crowd seemed to be hugely enthusiastic for the monarchy.
Yeah.
Does it make sense to you, Pat?
No, I've always held a view that when you celebrate monarchy, know what you're doing? You're celebrating your own inferiority. You're accepting that there's somebody superior to you. And, when I look at
Are you saying, Pat, that there's nobody better than you?
Absolutely. I don't think there's anybody worse than me, but I don't think there's anybody, and I would hold that true of every human being.
Yeah.
Any reasonable human being, anyway. I sit and watch this whole thing about royalty. Right, here we are. They're an unelected family. Ordinary working people. Give them money. I think it's 85 million a year from the public purse.
It's more than that. It's 185 million.
Maybe it's, I don't know what it is.
185 million.
185 million to wave and nod, right? The Queen is worth, I think, somewhere, I read it somewhere quite recently, our personal wealth is worth as 400, somewhere in the region of 400 million. And the estate assets belonging to the royal family, apparently, are worth 22.5 billion. Yet we, Johnny, who works down a mine or a call center, and we, Josephine, who works somewhere else, like Asda or Tesco's, if she is contributing to keep that family in a superior position, unelected, unaccountable, and as you can see, sometimes seemingly above the law. And I'm going, well, no, is that not a complete anachronism? Are people so uneducated and so stupid, that we believe in the idea of a born royal family that they're so much superior to the rest of us?
But you speak, Pat, you speak to the average English person, and if you speak to any of those hundreds, thousands that were crowding around Buckingham Palace, they will tell you that they're really glad that they have a monarchy, and they'll say it's the envy of other countries. And normally speaking, whenever they go on tour, like when not necessarily Queen Elizabeth, but when other members go on tour, people come out to see them. It seemed to me, I was listening to people, they're giving their reasons, they were delighted with it. They're all very happy with her. And the reasons they give to the interviewer were two. One, she's been in post for 70 years. Yeah. 70 years. And the second thing was that she's worked so hard all that time. I want to contradict both those. She is, there's no doubt about it. She's been in place for 70 years. I remember her being put in place, God help me. Yeah. But that's no good. It's like you, Pat, saying, I'm such and such an age. What do you think of that? It's not you. You got lucky. You're still alive. Me too. I'm lucky. I'm alive. And you can't boast about your longevity to people as if it was something that you created yourself. And likewise, she can't boast, or the people to boast on her behalf that she's lasted 70 years. It's sort of daft. It really is. I suppose we get this with birthdays anyway. People say congratulations on your birthday. Yeah. It's not you. You didn't do it. Somebody else did it, or some force. You just got lucky. The second thing is the work. And this is the thing I really would agree with you totally on, Pat. The work consists of shaking hands, attending banquets, living in luxury with servants on every side. I don't think there's a contradiction in any of those. Everybody would admit those. They believe in the notion of the hereditary monarchy because, they say it gives continuity and
Yeah.
other countries don't have it. Well, I don't see how it adds to the continuity. Other countries that have been without it seem to limp along reasonably well.
Jude,
One last argument, Pat, very quickly,
go ahead.
and that is they say, look, it is hugely good for tourism. You know, they go to Buckingham Palace and they say, yeah, she's in there, and wow, and you see them peering in, and you'll see people getting their photograph taken in front of it and all the rest of it. And they say, oh, well, if she, people have said, well, what about if we abolish the monarchy, leave the buildings? Oh, no, it wouldn't be the same. I checked on the Palace of Versailles, which is where Louis XIV used to hang out. Now, Louis is dead, as you know.
Apparently.
And 10 million people a year go to the Palace of Versailles to have a look at it. So if they go there, they're bound to find their way to Windsor or Buckingham Palace or whatever without necessarily having the Queen there. Last thing, I have no control of it. The English people seem to really, really like it. So good luck to them, is what I say.
Yeah, no, but the whole thing, first of all, that people are envious of having a monarchy. That's delusional, absolutely delusional. But, by the way, wasn't William didn't he do a tour around some of the Caribbean countries there? Just see how welcome he was. They were booed, people and so on. The days of the royals going around and waving in their hands in their jacket pocket, and the other hand, like Charles. That's right. As you said, I don't see Norway or Sweden or any of these places absolutely bemoaning the lack of a royal family. Jude, I think it's a totally outdated idea, and Jude, I really genuinely think there's something wrong with people who support a royal family. I don't mean that in insulting, but I think the Queen is a fine woman. Her speech when she was in Dublin was superb, and I have nothing. I know. Towards her, no animus towards her as a person. She seems decent enough and all the rest, and so on. But Jude, let me throw someone at you as well. I wonder how the Queen, she harks back to a more, 70 years, as you say, and a more innocent age, and back to a sort of what would you say, Jude, almost a rural England where they played cricket on the green and the miners and there was football on a Saturday, and so on, the old England. Like when she almost stands for sort of a rurification and sort of an old England that no longer exists. When she goes, and Charles is not popular, Andrew is certainly not popular. The modern royals seem to have it. How long do you think the monarchy is the monarchy safe when Elizabeth goes?
Yeah, I would agree. Well, I think most English people are a bit worried because they do wonder. Like Charles has waited for so long, and he has sort of a troubled past, and people associate him with I was going to say the killing, but the death of Princess Di and all that messy stuff. It might be hard to keep it going. I just think if you think in terms of principles, it's hard to say that you believe in democracy. That is to say that people are, they get a job because they apply for it, and then they see if they've got the credentials, and the best person to have credentials gets the job. It's not if I go in and say, listen, my dad was Paddy Collins, so that's why I'm applying for this job. They tell you to take a walk. It doesn't happen anywhere else. This notion of hereditary monarchy flies in the face of the belief in democracy. It's not what you can do or your qualities, is who you are, which royal womb you slithered out of. That's what counts. And that seems to be daft. But just a couple of quick points and then we'll move on. One is that, not having a head of state who's hereditary isn't necessarily pain-free. For example, Michael D. Higgins, in my opinion, has no more right to be an Ars Uachtaráin right now as head of state of the South than has the Queen of England to be the head of state of England, or Great Britain or UK.
Excuse me, Dr. Collins, I
Yeah.
totally disagree with you.
Well, he's told it. He told a lie. He told a lie. He told a lie.
No, you can't make a statement like that.
No, I'm going to explain it to you if you listen. If you listen.
He stood for election and he got the biggest
I
vote
did,
ever.
he did. But he told a lie.
Vote.
He told a
So
lie.
he's-
He got elected the first time in the business of a lie. He
You're
said
gonna
he
say-
wouldn't. He said he was a one-term president. That's what he was running as.
and he was urged to stand by various politicians, and that was endorsed by the electorate. They give him the biggest vote ever.
But
Not
does
at
that
all.
not
is
does that
not a
not
lie.
invalidate his
That's
previous
simply
election?
changing your position.
Does
Just 'cause
that
you
not
don't like him.
validate his previous position when he said, "I will only serve for one term"? It sounds a bit like Boris Johnson to me. I'm a bit worried about that. Anyway, we didn't be distracted.
He is totally legitimate. He was I was going to say endorsed. He was invoked, I suppose is the word, by various sources to run for a second term,
Pat,
which he did, and he got a bigger vote the second time than he did the first time.
Pat, did he go back on his word?
That's not at all. He simply
Hold it. You're saying you're saying he didn't go back on his word.
He gave way to the wishes of the people.
Okay, let's move to something not controversial. Like, is Russia to blame for the invasion of Ukraine? You saw this in some people on social media.
If you read social, and there's an absolute group I've come across saying, basically, Russia was set up, that NATO is to blame, that Putin is in the right, that if it was Cuba surrounding America with nuclear warheads and armies and all the rest of it. And Jude, I thought, no, this was just a couple of Looney Tunes. But Japers, Jude, there's quite a lot of them, and they're all piling on and saying, no, the West is to blame. No, I am not having, and I've never said that the West was innocent, and that they're not, they're far from blameless. But if you want to go down that road, like America, in this case, now you can accuse America of a bit of Iraq and places like that, but in this case, the same holds true. Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukraine didn't invade Russia. America didn't invade Russia. Secondly, as Americans, Blinken and various people and Macron went to Russia and talked to Putin and were held up to ridicule by making them sit at the end of a table, as much as to say, look, I'm in charge here, etc. And actually, it was humiliating. But they went there to try and get a deal with them. So, thirdly, 44 million people live in Ukraine, and 80% of them voted at the last election, and they voted to go with the West. They want to look West. They want a lifestyle free from the autocrats, where for the 22 years that Putin has been in control in Russia. Russia is not a democracy, no matter what way you come at it. You can dress up. So, and I listened to all these people, and they just simply ignored. And I think I've gone to a stage of going and saying, is there something wrong with does everybody believe that America is the great Satan and the Russia is the good guys?
Well, you see, I think it comes out of the force of the popular or accepted view. It's so strong and it's accepted without question that I think people then sort of slide towards the opposite extreme. I mean, you're right. There's no doubt that, Putin invaded the Ukraine. He has tortured and killed, his forces have tortured and killed probably thousands of people now. Yeah. But that's a slightly different thing from saying that Putin is just like Hitler. He's going to, if you let him, get any victory in the Ukraine, the next thing he'll be after is Poland, or the next thing he'll be after is Sweden or whatever. I don't buy that. I might be wrong, but I can see how he's trying, as you suggested yourself, to protect Russia, get buffer states and so on. All I'm saying is there's an argument to be said on his side, while at the same time, there quite clearly is an argument to be said against him, because we see the scenes of what's happening with people. So I think in a way what annoys me, and I'm sure it's part of that sort of extremism view that these people on social media take that you've been reading, I think what gets them is the reporting of the war is so completely one-sided. It shows you they did this, they did this, they did this. There must have been things that were done by even the Ukrainians and the supporting of them with weapons. There must be a degree of not so much black and white as grey. And I think that's what people get fed up with, and then they slump to the other extreme.
Yeah.
Is that
no, I agree with that, Jude. Actually, you know what is they say? The first casualty of any war is truth. You know, and there's no doubt about that. And by the way, the Ukrainians, there's some mucky elements there. But Jude, I think anybody with a rational mind who sits down and says, you know, and this one, if you're willing to use the same look that the Americans did in Iraq and that was wrong, well, you have to apply the same logic. There's the Russians going into Ukraine is wrong. Same idea.
I'd like to see more examples of journalists arguing the case from the Russian point of view, or let's have some there must be Russian journalists, you know, to write up a case for what they've done and present it to the West. I mean, through the newspapers even. It's just that we don't get anything. I always fear whenever there's a genuine grievance or something's wrong, they just pile in and there's no questions after
but Jude, what do you call it? Look at Russia. They've shut down the paper that was actually opposed to the war. That's been shut down. The state media are not allowed to regard it as an invasion. It's a special military operation. Now, and a couple of journalists who have sort of reported on the war have been sort of basically intimidated into stop.
Okay, Pat, that's fine. What about here? You could say exactly what you've said from the Western point of view. You know, what newspaper is opposed to the war? What journalists?
But hold on, Jude, they have a choice here. Right here, Jude, very simple, and I'm pardon the crude. I said to somebody last night, right, say if I walked down somewhere in England and said F-U-C-K Boris Johnson, now it might get done for obscene, but nobody's going to try walking down Red Square in Moscow and saying fuck Putin. You know, it's simply not going to happen. You know,
fair enough. And I suppose on the other hand, of course, you have to, that's fair enough. I was going to say you have to maybe take into account the history. Like the Soviet Union fell apart. The place was in bloody chaos for, I'd say, about a decade. Putin then came on, the strong man, pulled them together. And sometimes when you pull together a place that was falling apart, you can't afford to have the elbow room that you have in a settled state.
But there's so many things that, you know, by the way, I've got engaged in social media with a couple of people. I couldn't believe this. Here's the thing.
You're a warrior, Pat. Do you know that? You're a warrior. You're a warrior.
But no, it is, Jude. See, when you're a journalist and a former journalist, I think it's just a way of life. Other people go out and dig spuds and work in a factory or teach. Like a journalist spends all their life arguing about things. But what happened? The Russians invaded a country, and that's as simple as that. You know, and they invaded a democratic country. The what do you call it? The Ukrainians had voted. Jude,
I'm not sure that's totally true, Pat. I mean, I could be wrong now, but I think I read that in 2014, the legally elected government was deposed.
I'm
subject to correction on that, but I have a funny feeling.
But there was an election. Someone about it was it 2018, 2019. 80% of them voted.
Well, there may have been an election later on, but there was
all sorts of things going on. There was pro this Russian and anti, and but anyway, but I think it was 2018 or 2019. There was an election. 80% of the people voted, and the majority of those voted to go west. So it was. And by the way, they do have a mucky bit of. And Nazis and there's some for
this is what I keep hearing that.
The Azov Brigade, I think they're called.
Well, there should be more reporting of that so we can get our I think their case would be the West's case would be far stronger if they would admit the points at which, if you like, it's weaker. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
If you try to do a blanket yes, then people like me anyway will say, no, I'm not sure about that. That sounds a bit fishy. So I would urge them to let opposing views be heard. Okay, who shall we move on to next? Shall we move on?
I enjoyed Boris saying that.
Don't call him Boris. Boris sounds as if you like him. Call him bloody Johnson.
Johnson. All right, okay, but all right, Bojo.
Oh no, that's a little toy man.
That's even more chummy.
Bloody Johnson, I say.
Right, anyway, Bloody Johnson says, I love it. Was on, I think it's in Mum's Net or something.
Yes, it was Mum's Net. You're dead right.
Yeah, he said yesterday that he thought it was the responsible thing for him to stay in office. How isn't the man, is the sacrifice, the self-sacrifice he made for the people of Britain is to be commended, Jude. I'll leave it to you.
Well, he says that the people, Johnson says that the people, he himself, I guess, and the people that work for him have been working blindingly hard.
Yes.
That's really hard, blindingly hard. And it would be the right thing to do to stay on. Well, you know, I'll tell you something. In a way, he's right, because he's the guy that most Tories would still want to have as leader. If it was not the case, they would dump him. So he's sort of right in a way, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, he extends it, I think, beyond the Tory party. I think there are loads of people who would do a much better job for England, but he's doing the best job for the Tory party, and the Tories want him. So, you know,
I always remember the guys who say, "No, I am willing to stand to serve the people." In other words, I'm really a gobshite with an ego the size of a mountain. But like there's a certain politician I met one time, and he says to me, "My people want me to stand," and I thought, "You arrogant gobshite." Who
was that, Pat?
No, I'm not. I'm not saying certain.
If I name a few names, you know your head.
Donegal politician who, by the way, stood once and never got elected afterwards. But we're not the way. Right? Anyway, Bojo attended these parties, and he said he was doing it out of a sense of leadership that people would feel undervalued and underappreciated if he didn't show up, and he wanted them to see that he appreciated their effort. But here's the thing, Jude: there was no the rules applied to everybody equally. For him to use that, he and his cabinet colleagues were the ones making the rules and saying there should be no exceptions. There were plenty of people, Jude, we've been down this road before. The people who didn't go to funerals, people who, when their parents or brothers or siblings or whatever were dying, stayed away because only so many could go there. And then they couldn't go and visit people in OAP homes and so on. And people obeyed the rules. And there's this arrogance and all the rest of it. But he's coming out now. He says, because I wrote it down. He says there's huge economic pressures. There's a war in Europe, and we have a massive agenda. So it would not be the responsible thing to do to resign. Yeah. Now, Jude, that is arrogance on steroids.
Well, I think that Boris is a good example of style, the triumph of style over substance.
Absolutely.
He has got style. There's no doubt about that. He's got charm. And, in the same way, well, not the same way, but a similar way to John F. Kennedy. I don't know what his political achievements were, but God, you have to look back in those days and think what a stylish guy he was. Yeah. Boris is oozing personality. That the fact of the matter is, when he speaks, or he comes into a room, it'd be very hard to draw your eyes away from him. Yeah. So that's what's winning so far the battle for him remaining in place.
Oh, you ever, Judy, one of the things I noticed that some time back, the former editor and Northern editor of RT was Tommy Gorman, and apparently Tommy and Johnson worked in Brussels together, and he was over in Northern Ireland, and the first thing, Tommy, he called him by his first name, and he calls all the journalists by their first name, and you can nearly, the way Trump was so aggressive, and you could feel the aggression there against them. They know the conflict. Johnson's the other way. He smooths them all out, and they're all nice to him because he calls them by their first name, makes them feel chummy and that he's their friend.
Yeah. Oh, he's clever. He's clever. He is a clever politician, or he wouldn't have been elected mayor of London twice. I think. Yeah. He wouldn't have got the job he has at present. But he's working very hard, knocking himself down. Fortunately, he's got people like Nadine Dorris to come out and say stuff like, to get rid of Boris would be to do Labour's work for them. And there again, the lot that they have in Labour are so pretty unexciting. I gather they're talking about this guy, Wes Streeting. Have you seen him?
No.
He's quite an impressive looking figure. He's a good looking guy. He's quite young. He's very self-possessed and very fluent. And somebody said he was a Blairite, essentially, or a Blair figure. And it's absolutely true. he's not physically like Blair. Well, he is to some extent physically like him, but he has that same manner, that reasonable but lively way of talking.
Yeah.
I think of Liberty in a sense they would get a guy like that in. Not that I like him, not that I want them to gain the leadership. I have Jeremy Corbyn back like your house guest, Jeremy Corbyn. I would have him back like a flash. But if they're going to go for somebody, I'd rather have anybody almost but Keir Starmer. We're running short of time, Pat. We're about 5 minutes now. So is there another topic you want to
say? Didn't you see a letter in the Irish Times from the ambassador of Israel?
Yes. It's headed Sinn Féin and Israel. And he says, he's talking to Mary Lou McDonald.
Yeah.
Now, Mary Lou McDonald was asked what would their foreign policy be, apart from United Ireland. Well, that's not a foreign policy, is it? Yeah, it is.
No, it's not.
It is, because the Brits are involved in it.
That's why we...
Part of your country is occupied by a foreign force.
The fact that, what do you call him, Coveney is in charge of Northern Ireland, and he's called the Minister for Foreign Affairs, is actually an insult to the Irish people. But go ahead.
I know, but I think you'd agree with me that Boris Johnson isn't an Irishman.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Anyway, the ambassador from Israel to Ireland wrote this letter, and he says, Mary Lou McDonald said that her foreign policy, or the foreign policy of Sinn Féin, should they get into government, one of the things that would forefront would be the question of Palestine and the notion of two states. Is the he or she? It's Leron. I don't know. It's a woman or a man. Leron Bar Sadeh. Is that a man or a woman?
That's why I think it's a man, Joe.
Well, whatever. He or she has weighed in and said that this comparison of modern Israel and colonial Britain is a false one.
Yeah.
She says, oppression of people, that matches with Ireland and Britain, their history. Killing of civilians, that matches with Britain and our history. Siege mentality, yes, that would apply to Israel too. People have been put out of their houses, yes, that fits too. People have been put off their land, yes, that fits too. So what is he talking about? Of course, there's a comparison can be made between the history of Ireland and the history of what's happening to the Palestinian people, except that theirs is compressed into a period of about 50 years.
Jude, look, I landed at your house this morning with a Bible and said, by the way, it's 3,000 years ago, according to this book, we lived here, so I'm entitled to it. Now, and despite the fact that the Conses have lived there for 300 or 400 or 500 or 600 years or whatever, there was this thing called the Nakba in 1948, where the Palestinians were chucked off their land and to make way for the Jews. Now, by the way, I understand that, and a part of me certainly agrees. They should have had a homeland and so on. But one injustice does not negate another injustice, and the Palestinians have been badly treated. Jude, some guy from a Jewish guy from Brooklyn can move to Israel and get a house. A Palestinian can't. Yeah. There's something seriously wrong with that. But by the way, Jude, let's get this. I am not having a go at the Jewish people. What I am having a go at is their treatment of the Palestinians. Jude, the number of Palestinians that have been shot dead by Israeli forces in recent times is unbelievable. The day that the Americans moved their embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, they shot dead individually, one after another, 52 Palestinians, and they wounded 1,200 others. It was Bloody Sunday marked by a factor of about 10, right? All over the place, Jude. And quite recently shot dead on a target and assassination, Al Jazeera journalist. There was another journalist shot dead, I think on Wednesday of this week. And by the way, the final thing I'm saying, Jude, remember we had internment without trial. The Israeli state has got this thing called administrative detention, where literally thousands of Palestinians have been held without trial and in long-term jail, and then they keep saying it's a democracy.
Yeah. Well, Pat, I think that all of what you say is absolutely true. However, the time is against us. Yes. So I thank you to put a smile on your face. Have a merry quip for both our viewers. some words of consolation facing into this platinum. Well, here's a question. Will you at any point look at the TV celebrations of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee and smile?
Jude, I'll tell you exactly.
Good on all weekend.
No, yesterday morning, I was turned on Sky News, and I was going, geez, that sound, there was a band playing. You know what they were playing, Jude?
What?
Spancel Hill. The band were playing Spancel Hill, and then followed by the Cliffs of Dooneen.
But maybe that was a counterbalance to the fact that some of the reporters talked about the regiment. Here come the mix.
Yeah.
Some Irish regiment.
They're the Irish Guards, and apparently that's the name for them.
Call them the mix. I think that's. I mean, I could be really abusive now and use the same kind of language about black people. There you are.
I don't get too excited about that because I refer to the British as the Brits. So, like, I don't really give a monkey's what they call us. You know.
Okay, Pat, we better stop because I'd hit the plug hole very quickly. Okay, enjoy your weekend.
Enjoy your weekend, Dr. Collins.
Stay away from television.
Yes, absolutely.
Have a nice time apart from that. Okay, Pat, thanks.
Cheers. Bye. Bye.